Welcome to the Tansson Talk Show. I'm Brandon, the host of the show, and I'm so glad to be here today. Our mission here is to bring people together, and today I'm very excited to have a conversation with Konner. Konner, thank you for coming on to the show, and I hope that you're doing well today.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you on. And so, first of all, how is your day going thus far?
It's going well. It's bright and early here in Chicago, so having my coffee. So if you hear me or see me slurping, don't mind. But otherwise, doing pretty well. About to prepare to go out of town for the holidays and having a great time.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad to hear that you are enjoying your week thus far. And so, before we get started, are you able to go ahead and introduce yourself for the watching and listening audience here today?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm Connor. I am currently in Chicago, like I mentioned, and I actually just finished my master's degree at DePaul University. Thank you, studying PR and advertising. So, moving on to my next chapter after my master's degree. But I also studied at DePaul for undergrad and got a very broad communication and media bachelor's degree. And it was really during my time at DePaul that I realized that PR and ad was up my alley, and then I started tailoring all of my coursework towards that, and by extension getting involved on campus and things like PRSSA and also outside of the classroom in terms of internships and experiences and volunteering and things like that that really all surrounded that ultimate career goal of mine. So
Well, I'm very excited, like I said, for us to get into this conversation, and yeah, and I mean, I don't even know where to begin with this, but I guess I'll actually start off with saying, so I know you mentioned you just finished your master's degree, which, first of all, massive congratulations to you on that.
thank you.
Yeah, that is amazing. And if I remember correctly, you actually finished in November of 2023.
That's right. Yeah. DePaul is on quarters trimesters. So we have 10-week terms that begin right after Labor Day. So it's a little bit different compared to like a traditional semester system. But I actually really came to enjoy it throughout my time at DePaul because um, if you had a class you didn't love so much, it was over in 10 weeks. And if you had a class that you really enjoyed, it was still over in 10 weeks, but you didn't like, there was no lull like I feel like some semester classes have. And every week it's something new and you're always going. And I feel like I really liked that fast paced nature. It's certainly not for everyone, but so yeah, we wrapped up in mid to late November, right before the Thanksgiving holiday, and so that meant I went home for Thanksgiving and could breathe and was done and was just waiting for my final grades to post. And after that, December has been leisurely wrapping up my internship for the fall and getting to travel a little bit. Excuse me, getting to travel a little bit as well.
Well, that certainly is something to be thankful for the Thanksgiving holiday.
Absolutely, yeah. You're telling me.
And and for DePaul, did they have a ceremony for you all in November? Because I know not every university does a winter ceremony, but I know almost all of them do spring, of course.
Yeah, so they don't have a winter commencement ceremony. So everyone will come back because I guess when you're on trimesters, you can finish in the fall, you can finish in the winter, you can finish in the spring, traditional time. So we will have our spring commencement in June because, of course, everything's a little like off a month or two from the semester system. But I'm looking forward to that. I got to walk last June for my bachelor's, so just took me an extra year for the master's degree, which looking back, I kind of wish I had prolonged it a little bit because there's no reason to rush on anything in retrospect. But yeah, so 1 year bachelor's and then the next I'll walk for my master's. So bittersweet for sure, but it'll be a great time.
I mean, how cool was that though to have like back to back ceremonies there?
Yeah, it's I took a lot of classes in high school, and that's how I did everything so quickly because I took dual enrollment classes and those all transferred. And then I came in during COVID. I came into university during COVID. So my first full year was all COVID. So it wasn't really the true college experience, as I'm sure many of your listeners can relate to. And so from there, I finished my degree really early, and I was like, "There's no way I'm entering the job market right now at 19 years old. Like, this is not going to happen." And so I tagged on the master's degree, which is not something I really ever saw myself doing, but it just so happened that I graduated early. DePaul had a really seamless program where you could transition into masters really easily. And I knew that I wanted to study more of the PR and advertising route. And so it all just kind of worked out for me to get into this program. And here I am, 2 degrees later, and it's still, I mean, it's all flown by. And I'm so fortunate to have the support system at DePaul to kind of push me further and further. But yeah, I mean, I'm still surprised as anyone, I think.
I think that's a part of it too. Is I mean, even I think about like myself. Like I also did a lot of programs in high school and everything. Prior to entering university full time, and it it's so funny how many people are like, "Wow, it's like okay, well, you have everything planned out and all this and that. Like you're working on your master's. It's like I feel like this is more so accumulation of a whole bunch of pure coincidences that just sort of worked out in a very nice way, but at the same time, like that's a lot of information and very little time.
Yeah. Happy little accidents, I'm telling you, because I think I've gotten to the point where I feel like I have a little bit of sage wisdom, even, or at least I give the aura that I have a little bit of sage wisdom, but I'm still like figuring things out just like everyone else. So I will, through PRSSA and through being involved on campus, I will chat with younger students, and they're always asking me like, how did you have everything figured out? And how did you get this internship? And how did you, decide that you wanted to study for a master's? And I'm like, it just kind of happened. Like I don't have a magic spell or anything. I'm just existing and taking opportunities when they come up, and trying to be a nice person along the way and make relationships. And um, so yeah, I mean, I don't have the secret formula as much as I would love to.
Well, nevertheless, though, I mean, it does seem like everything's been, working out for you. And so I did want to ask, since you are 1 month having finished your master's degree, and so how does it feel like to finally be done with this stage?
Oh, like I said before, the word I keep using is bittersweet, because it really is. I'm still only 21 years old, so I still feel very youthful. Um, and at the same time, I have a lot of experience in terms of internships, and I have a lot of on-campus experiences, and I have met a lot of cool people and had a great time studying. And so it's going to be it's really challenging mentally to prepare myself to transition into a new life stage. And I think everyone kind of feels this. You have the post high school graduation feeling where you everyone's moving every which way, and you kind of have to be a big boy, big girl, moving into college. And now that I'm done with college, it's even more like stressful, but in the best way, because I feel so accomplished and I feel really prepared, and I have great contacts and, like I said, a great support system. But it is still really stressful. I can't lie. But I think I'm managing it well and taking a little bit of time to chill after I finish my degree so early, and like I said, raising my hand for opportunities, but also seeing what comes my way. So I don't know if I really have any sage advice there, but trust the process, I guess.
Well, that is just such great advice, and I believe you were mentioning too that you were doing an internship as well during your final semester.
Yes. So I interned this fall at AppGo Worldwide. So communications consultancy. They also just acquired Gig and McDonald's. So lots of different clients across the spectrum in terms of consumer facing and B2B and public affairs and all types of different clients. And so I interned in the Chicago office and kind of got to be a jack of all trades and work on many different clients that I didn't really have much experience on before. So everything from like biopharma to more consumer facing things to different nonprofits as well. And so I did that part time, roughly 25 hours a week. And then I took classes, grad classes in the evening. And then I also helped lead the DePaul PRSSA chapter on top of trying to have a social life and doing a little bit of traveling on the weekends, things like that. So, yeah, it was a busy last term, but I think the last few terms have been really busy. So I was well prepared, I suppose.
Well, definitely sounds like a busy one, but at least you were able to finish out strong.
Yes, absolutely.
And you're going into your most recent term. So, did you like expect it to be as busy as it ended up being, or did it just sort of happen like that?
Such a good question. I feel like I was going into the fall term thinking it was going to be a little bit easier than my previous terms, because I basically took an extra class in the spring, and so I only needed two classes in the fall, which is still technically, I think, a full course load at DePaul because they're so tightly packed in the 10-week term. But I had always taken three at a time, and so I was like, oh, two classes, it'll be great. But then I added on the part time internship, and then PRSSA stuff was really busy in the fall. And then, like I said, I traveled a little bit and I tried to have a social life, especially like battling the mental warfare that was like, oh, this is your last semester, like you need to have a good time. And so all of that combined into actually me being probably one of my busiest terms in terms of grad school. And so I don't know. I guess I was a little bit naive going into the fall semester or fall term to think that it was maybe going to be a little bit easier, but of course it wasn't. But I think I've grown accustomed to always being busy and always keeping a really rigid calendar and having my own type A organization to get through all of this. So it was okay. I survived, but I think, like I said, I was a little naive in the beginning to think that it was going to be easier.
And how does it feel now, having gone from a super busy term to now being done and you're able to be with your own thoughts now?
That is a great way to put it. Definitely being with my own thoughts. I think I'm in the I'm in the honeymoon stage still where I am enjoying being like not busy and just like having, like I'll meet my friends for dinner or I'll just binge watch something. But I think after the holidays, especially, I will start to be like, okay, what's next? Because I just am a busybody in that regard. But yeah, right now I'm still riding that high of I'm done with everything. I have nothing to do. It's fantastic. I traveled a little bit over the last couple weeks, so that was, that took a lot of time and a lot of mental energy to travel, as I'm sure you probably know. And so I don't know. I'm enjoying it now, riding that wave, but at some point I will need to get my feet wet doing something.
Well, nevertheless, definitely at least enjoy the time that you do have left, because it's one of the things where it's just like you think about growing up like with school and everything. It's like, okay, you always have winter break, spring break, summer break, and then yeah, same going into yeah, and then it's like after you graduate high school, you choose your college, you do the same thing, and then master's program. But then after that, it's like, oh, the break after this is the workforce, and then retirement.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's certainly something to grapple with. They don't tell you this when you're going into grad school that after this it's you got to be a big boy or a big girl or big adult. And yeah, like I said, I think I'm handling it well, but not sure that it's something I was entirely mentally prepared for, but I'll be okay.
Well, that's good at least, and yeah, but before I go back a little bit to ask some questions about how you got here, I did want to ask, how are your travels been?
Oh, they've been great. I've had several quick little jaunts. I've been calling them. So let's see. I went home to visit my parents in rural Illinois, which is far from a vacation, but still travel nonetheless. And so I did that around the Thanksgiving holiday, and then I was back in Chicago for a bit, and then I went to the East Coast and visited Philadelphia, where my friend from college is from. So I just like got to kind of like hang out with her and her family and kind of have a chill time there, and then of course explore Philadelphia as well. And then from there, I came back to Chicago for all of like 24 hours before getting on a flight to Europe. Um, and so explored. This was actually my first trip abroad, so I was a little bit nervous, but it was fantastic. And so I met my friend over there who's studying abroad, and we went to Milan, Italy, which was really, really cool. And then we finished the trip in London. And so I was there all of like 6 days. So it was a very quick trip, but like I said, I like that busybody feeling, and I got to see a lot in those 6 days. So I feel like it was totally worth the energy and the time and the money to fly over there and have a great time. I think it was also made better by the fact that I knew I was going to meet people and to meet people I knew and to have that like travel buddy. And so now I've been back in Chicago for a couple days. I'm still recovering. I've been sleeping a lot and enjoying my time off post travel and before I head home for the holidays. So
Well, that's really great. And yeah, and since you mentioned, of course, that you will be heading home for the holidays, so how far is your family or what you consider your home from where you are now?
yeah, so I grew up in Illinois, but I think most people don't realize that Illinois is really long. And so I grew up like at the very opposite end of Illinois from where Chicago is. So basically, like Indiana, Kentucky, like very culturally southern. And so I always like to say I grew up in the middle of a cornfield, which is not necessarily untrue. And so to answer your question, it's about a 6 hour drive from Chicago. And like I said, people don't always realize that Illinois is that long, but nonetheless, it is. So I can either drive for 6 hours, or I could take a train for roughly that long, or I could fly, and that's like a super short flight, like 45 minutes. But this time I am riding back with a friend, so that should be a fun long ride.
Yeah, that sounds like definitely a fun road trip.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fun but long.
Yes, yes.
But yeah, but nevertheless, though, so of course we were just speaking about your time growing up and everything. So I guess for you, did you always know like what you wanted to do when you finished out school, or I guess how was the process growing up for you?
Yeah, I think, like I said, I grew up in a really rural area, so it's not necessarily a given that everyone goes to college or everyone, um, you know, has like a traditional white collar career. A lot of people, I grew up in a big farming community. And so a lot of people will farm and a lot of people will, go into different blue collar sectors. And I always kind of knew that wasn't for me. And I think alongside that, I had this growing interest in technology and media. And I always remember, we had in the middle of nowhere dial up internet far too long, but I would love to, surf the web as much as a, young kid can, and play with my parents' computers and printers and cameras and video cameras, anything like that I could get my hands on. I was always really interested in that. And so that transcended into different things throughout school. In middle school, I directed a school news program. All of this in big air quotes because it was filmed on like uh, old Android phone. But I edited using Windows Movie Maker and I scripted and all of these things. And like I look back at that, and for a seventh and eighth grader, like that was pretty good. And so from there, I moved into high school and I started to realize that media and communications of some kind was really in my cards. And so I got more involved in high school and kind of utilized the resources that my small high school did have. So AV class and club, yearbook staff, yearbook editor. I think a lot of people in the communications field were on the yearbook staff or were the yearbook editors. That's like a common experience I've come to learn throughout my time studying in the comm space. But so I took advantage of all that. And then when it came time to pick a college, I knew I wanted to go to school in the Midwest, preferably because I am a Midwest boy at heart, and also obviously somewhere with a bigger media market than small town rural America. And so I ended up, ultimately coming to DePaul and touring DePaul with my mom. And I remember being like, okay, yeah, this is this is the vibe. I like this. It was a big step for me because my hometown literally has less than 1,000 people, and then I moved to humongous Chicago. And so it was a big adjustment. I think more so for my parents, knowing their little boy was in the big city, but it was pretty easy for me in terms of in that regard. But it's still a big adjustment to move away and to, start school and all of these big things. Especially when I did it, it was COVID time, so adding in all of those stressors as well. But to answer your question, yeah, I think I did know that tech and media and comms, of course, you don't know what those things are when you're in like middle school, but in terms of career paths, but I always did know that something in that field would be up my alley. And so came in studying communications because it was the most broad communications degree they had. And I did that by design, picking a broad degree and then hopefully tailoring further. And that's what I ultimately ended up doing. I took the entry level ad class and really liked it. And then I took the entry level PR class and loved it even more. And so I started tailoring all of my undergrad classes to be PR and ad and, integrated marketing, strategic communications, things like that, whatever you might call it. And then from there, tacked on the master's degree to study it even further. And it really has been great. I think I've had a great support system in the College of Communication at DePaul, and great professors and also great friends as well, to kind of burgeon all of these things and push me forward in many regards. So
Yeah, that's so interesting, though. I mean, hearing the progression for that, and I feel like there's so many like different questions I could ask about that. I mean, just because of just, I mean, like how much you really like got into everything, got involved in everything, and I love that you enjoy like yeah the media and communication and the tech side because for myself like I very much got into communication in part because of my love for tech and but
mhm.
it's like but then observing the stuff it's like I think love more learning about tech than actually doing the hands-on stuff myself
Right, right.
but it's like it's so funny to see like how people get into the different degree plans that they got into.
Totally. Yeah. I think a big part of it for me also was being able to, you mentioned tech, and like, I could not build a computer. Like, that's not for me. Not to say that I don't understand some of the fundamentals that come along with that, but I really take interest in um, the user experience. And I didn't ever really necessarily want to study user experience or anything like that. But I've always been like the tech kid. Like when I was in school, I would always help teachers with their tech issues, and of course, my family knows who to call whenever their iPhone's messing up. And so, channeling all of that into even like as a kid, taking these things that I know and synthesizing them into a way that the layperson could understand is communications in some form or fashion. And so doing that at a broader scale and being able to connect different audiences and stakeholders through communication to these really advanced tech topics is really interesting to me in retrospect, and kind of how I started doing that just like as a kid, and then slowly but surely transitioning that into actual tangible, career worthy things. So
Yeah, and I think the way that you described that, I mean, is so like I feel like that's like the best description of explaining even like my fascination with technology. It's just like yeah, it's like just because you are a techie person does not necessarily mean that like that's the field for you per se, but yet that exactly is what comm is though, and so it's so interesting like diving into that. And I like how you even mentioned in terms of like the stakeholders too. It's just like, it's like I never thought about it like that, but that is what that is.
yeah, I mean, and everyone needs to be met in a different place as well. Like, um, obviously, older people have the stereotype of um, not knowing how computers work, which I think in in like today's climate, I feel like everyone kind of knows how to use different technologies. But then you're meeting Gen Z and Gen Alpha people who grew up native to these different technologies, and so they have a completely different form of communication that needs to be given to them in order to understand and really resonate with different, um, technology messages. So it is really interesting. I think I could talk about that all day, but I'm sure there are other things to talk about too.
Yeah, well, I kind of actually want to take a step back a little. So, one of the things that you mentioned too is that, with growing up, even though of course you had a fascination like with tech and everything, is that your area, as you mentioned, had dial-up internet for way too long. So, do you remember how long, you all had dial-up internet and like the internet accessibility within your area?
Yeah, it's really, even to this day, still pretty abysmal. We had I'm trying to think. We had dial up definitely for too long. And I think most people had moved to like DSL and then eventually onto like fiber optic, internet like that. And we were still dealing with dial up as the only option, or satellite internet, which I don't know if you have any experience with satellite internet, but it is not great. I think whatever the Elon Musk satellite, what is that called? Starlink, I think that's what it's called. Um, that like has kind of brought satellite internet back into the forefront, and it's halfway decent, I think. But because a lot of people in my hometown, like in the rural areas, are starting to get Starlink, and they're raving about it, like on Facebook. But so we dealt with satellite internet for a while, and then eventually, I think like so many people in areas without broadband connectivity turn to cell providers because you often have a cell tower near you and you have one of the major carriers that's servicing your area pretty much. And so for us that was Verizon. And so we basically got one of those like portable hotspot things that gave you like 15 gigs of data for a month. And it's like, this is a terrible internet experience. It is slow, it's unreliable, you have to have it plugged in all the time, the devices were often bad. And you have like increasingly households having more and more and more connected devices. And so this is a little in the weeds. I don't know if you want me to go this far, but eventually, finally, Verizon started offering this home LTE box thing that actually gave unlimited internet and it was halfway decent and you could connect via Ethernet if you needed to, blah, blah, blah. Getting a little techie here. But so now that's what my parents have. For them, it's like fantastic. For me, living in the city, it's still a little subpar, but I know for them, like, given how unconnected broadband wise rural areas can be, it's really, really good for them. I think one of my as a nice segue, one of my first internships was actually for the local telecom company where I grew up. And so I interned for them, and, like they're kind of limited by the fact that you can only run fiber optic cables to communities that are going to be able to service and like make business sense for you to run cables to. So my parents living in the middle of a cornfield were not on the list, sadly, to run these long, expensive cables out their way. But it was really interesting to see the different, I guess, the digital divide, to use a cliche term, in terms of who has connectivity and how it really can be a defining factor in terms of getting ahead in the world, to use another cliche, and to be connected and to know what's happening in the world and having these luxuries that now that I live in the city and I kind of take for granted in terms of technology and connectivity that people in my hometown could not dream of because they just don't have the internet connection to do it. And another, sorry, I'm rambling, but another internship I had at my school district during the pandemic was helping them transition it into a hybrid learning plan during the pandemic, that first semester back in fall of 2020. And one of the things they literally had to do in my hometown was put these giant hotspots on school buses and drive them into like the towns and let people connect to those giant bus hotspots because people just don't have broadband connection. And I think a lot of people don't realize how, you know, limiting not having an internet connection can be. And I think because of that, I feel like I'm always hyper aware of people's internet connection and understanding just how, again, cliche, digital divide, how real that is. And so, anyway, I'm rambling at this point, but it is a really interesting thing to look at, and just knowing that not everyone in America has you know, a 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi signal. Like that's not a thing for everyone. So
Yeah, well, nevertheless, I mean, like, I'm so glad that you were able to, yeah, I mean, to speak about that because I was just going to ask too, like, when the COVID-19 pandemic happened, like, would you all have to do? Because, yeah, if not everyone had broadband connection to, I mean, to access materials. Yeah, it's interesting to hear that you all said that you had to connect them to buses to even, give everyone ability to learn.
yeah, I mean, my school district went in knowing that not everyone was going to have broadband connection. So they actually, in the very beginning, in like as soon as we were called off from school, you could come and get like a giant packet of worksheets essentially printed out. Um, and they would do that, or you could even have it mailed to you if that was more your speed. Because not everyone had computers, number one, because we didn't have school issued computers. Not everyone had broadband. So a lot of people just had their cell phone, and that's not really a good device to do long math problems on necessarily. And so it was something that my district, and I know many other districts like it, and communities for that matter, had to reckon with. And again, it just gives me like a sensibility and a bit of a sensitivity even to different avenues of connecting to the internet and being connected. And I think, um, I don't know, it's just something I've always kept in mind in terms of keeping that in the background, and also these different communities that have different levels of connectivity. In terms of when I'm crafting communications for different audiences, like it's not always a given that people know how to use this device or know how to connect to this internet, or you know all of these things. And I think that is definitely something to keep in mind whenever crafting any messaging for various audiences.
Yeah, and going with that, into, of course, yeah, your different internships, and I know that you just mentioned, two of them, but what were some of the other internships that you had a chance to be a part of, and how was the application process to even apply for these internships?
Yeah, so I think someone on campus recently told me, they said, "Hey, someone said that I need to talk to you, that you have like a PhD in getting jobs." And I was like, I don't know about that, but um, I have had more internships than I think the average Joe needs to have. The way that I saw it was that I'm building experience, and also this is how I made money through college. So I would work part time in an internship, and during the summer full time, and that was how I, um, made money. And so I think that's how I justified it in my head. But you certainly don't need. Um, I'm speaking to younger people like me. Like you don't need 10 internships to have a good resume and to have good experience. So I don't ever. I always like to give that caveat, because I think people can look at having 10 internships and be like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be that great. And trust me, first of all, not great, very stressful. And secondly, you certainly don't need 10 internships to feel like you are successful. So, giving that caveat, I have had a lot of internships. Um, like I said, most recently I was at AppGo, which was a pretty simple application in terms of just, I submitted. I knew a couple people there, so I reached out for informational interviews. And I think that obviously helps a little bit when you have someone on the inside to kind of help you out in the application. And so went that route and got that. And that was a part time fall internship. And just before that, I was interning at Apple in California, which was certainly like a dream come true. Being a kid in the middle of a cornfield who barely had broadband, I would still be watching tech YouTube and watching like these tech YouTube influencers unbox iPods and unbox iPhones and things like that. And then fast forward to this summer where I'm literally working with these tech influencers to get, you know, iPhone to be talked about positively and to manage the reputation around all of these different products. And also just a stellar experience to be able to move to the West Coast for the summer and work with some really, really smart people. And um, I like love Apple products. That's always been my thing. So as a nerd at heart, loved working for Apple. And then I've also worked in several gigs here in Chicago as well. So I worked for the Chicago Transit Authority doing internal comms and employee engagement and recruitment marketing, which was a change of pace, but something I really have come to appreciate by knowing how important internal comms is. And so having that experience has been really beneficial. I also interned for a political comms agency during the 2022 midterms. And that was, you know, I've also always been interested in politics, and especially um, the communications that surround them. I think everyone our age kind of has come up in a world where political communications is really divisive. And everyone knows that political media has this aura around it. So I kind of wanted to see what that was like on the inside. And I think it was a really, really beneficial internship, because I got to learn that I don't want to be in the political space. Loved the people I worked with, and I liked a lot of the work, but politics is just a different ball game that is not for me. And sometimes those are the most beneficial internships to have, ones where you learn what you don't like more so than the things that you do like. So did that. I interned at Edelman, the PR firm, working on tech accounts. So I worked on AT&T and DirecTV. Those were my main clients. And so that was really cool, kind of thrown into the deep end of, I'd never interned at a firm before. And so being thrown into the deep end with Edelman had a great experience. I still chat with my managers there and really enjoyed my time that summer. And then I also interned. I'm like going on and on, but I also interned on campus at DePaul doing PR for the university and getting to work with staff and faculty and students and tell their stories and then amplify them in the Chicagoland area. And then I also worked with the small telecom company in my hometown, doing like mainly social media stuff for them. So that was cool. And then I interned for my school district back in 2020, helping them transition to a hybrid learning plan and get one-to-one student to device ratio. So I unboxed like hundreds of Chromebooks that summer, just setting them up and prepping them for students. And it was a really interesting thing to see behind the scenes of how all of this is going to work and how we're going to communicate with students and faculty and parents of how this new learning plan is going to work in light of the pandemic. So I've had many varied experiences, some more similar than others, but I think all of them, like I said, whether you like the internship, whether you don't like the internship, you take something away from that. And it's a paycheck, number one, but also you're adding to your resume, but you're also gaining the people skills and the technical skills and all of these things. So I'm a big advocate for internships. Like I said, you don't have to have 10 of them, but definitely take some time to have pertinent job experience in the field that you're wishing to pursue.
That is really cool that you were able to get all those different experiences. And so even though it would, given how many internships that you have, it would, take quite a while to speak about every single, one of them per se. But I guess overall for you, what would you say have been some of the highlights and standouts, in terms of, some of the different experiences, whether it be like the internship itself or just whatever some of the projects that you've worked on?
Yeah, I think, like I said, Apple was a dream come true. I've always dreamed of working at Apple, especially now that they have the new headquarters, Apple Park. Like that's been even just to visit, I was like going to be ecstatic. And then I people also asked me how I got that job, and I literally just applied. Like I didn't know anyone. I had no connections on the West Coast. I just applied and really took a weekend to work on my cover letter and make sure everything was perfect. Had a trusted friend read over everything and submitted the application. And then I've told this story multiple times. I got the email to interview and I thought it was spam. I thought that it was fake. Like you just gaslight yourself into thinking that some of these things aren't possible for you, but it was, and I got to do it, and it was a great experience. So that's a standout in and of itself, just by getting to work for Apple. But also the work there was stellar. Like the people are so smart and they're so dedicated, and they're all really aware of their place in the tech space and are willing to share like all of those different um, communications and messages with the audiences that they know are loyal, and some aren't so loyal, and so they have to make sure that they're catering to many different audiences. And so aside from that, I think my major experiences have been in firms, so Edelman and AppGo. Working with clients is an art in and of itself, and obviously as an intern you're not often client facing, but even just seeing how account leaders are making decisions and seeing how you as a lower ranking intern or lower ranking employee are affecting the broader bottom line of the agency, but also the bottom line of happiness with the client is something that I, as a like people pleaser at heart, I think really was natural for me, in the best way possible. And so I've really enjoyed that. And also, I think my program at DePaul really emphasizes agency work as an early career professional, just for getting that varied experience across different clients. And I think even though I've only interned at agencies thus far, it is really true that you get so much different variance in work across different clients and different writing styles and different expectations in terms of timelines and communications and all of these different things that you don't necessarily get in an in-house setting, but both of them obviously have their pros and cons. So all of that to say, I've had a lot of great internships, and I think it's all been supplemented by great coursework at DePaul, but also on-campus activities like PRSSA, which have only supported all of these different workplace experiences.
I'm so glad that, like I said, that you're able to have these fun experiences, and and sort of like live out a little bit of your, I mean, of your dream in doing them, especially like with your Apple internship that you had.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely, want to ask about, of course, your PRSSA involvement as well. But right before I do that, I will actually ask. So, for the internships that were not within your area, how was it like to, I mean, to travel for these different internships and explore new areas?
Oh, it was great. I mean, I had never even been to the West Coast before moving there for Apple, and so they put me up in intern housing, which was great. You had kind of built-in friends and your roommates throughout the summer, and I also was able to rent a car for the summer, so I was able to kind of explore the greater Bay Area and see all that had to offer. But then also, you're just so close to everything, at least in comparison to my Midwest life. So I visited Seattle, I visited Portland, um, and then obviously all around the Bay Area. I went to Yosemite, which isn't far from the Bay Area. So that was awesome. Getting to see different things and meet different people and all of that on top of having really satisfying work throughout the week. I found every weekend to be fantastic. Granted, I did not like have a super restful summer because I was always going, 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 but I would not change it for sure. It was great.
I'm so glad to hear it. And yeah, and of course you were heavily involved within your PRSSA chapter, which for those who don't know, which I'm pretty sure everyone here watch you listening knows, is the Public Relations Student Society of America. And so overall, how was the experience for you being a part of your chapter?
Yeah, I think I always tell people that I went to my first PRSSA meeting for extra credit. And then from there, I kind of got sucked into the fantastic machine that is PRSSA. I think that's something that a lot of people do. They like show up for free food or for extra credit or something like that, and then they're sucked in. And for me, that was, I mean, again, a cliche, but that's how it happened. I went for extra credit, and from there, I realized, and this was all happening around the same time that I was deciding that PR and advertising was my route within the communications field and was deciding to tack on the master's in PR and advertising. And so it all just kind of fell into place that PRSSA was there as a great opportunity for me on campus. And it was something that I felt like I kind of had like a place to be in and I felt welcomed. And I also had a friend who we took our first PR class together, Sarah. And from there, we joined PRSSA together, went to our first meeting, and Sarah encouraged me to join the e-board with her. And I was like, um, okay. So I joined like very nervously the e-board. And from there, I think I really was brought in with welcomed arms and got really close with the e-board that was presently, leading the chapter that year, and got really close with the advisor and started taking more PR classes and getting more ingrained in the process and, applying for scholarships and entering different events and raising my hand and helping to lead the chapter in various ways. And from there, it just kind of kept going, like a snowball. Like I kept getting more involved and meeting more people and more people and really trying to make the most out of this organization that really does have a lot there if you just raise your hand and take advantage of it. And that's at the chapter and national level. Obviously, each chapter is different, but if you can weasel your way into doing as many things with PRSSA as possible, I think you'll end your college experience knowing that you're really well connected and that you've had some really cool career experiences along the way. And so I just can't sing PRSSA's praises enough. And I think probably a lot of people who you've chatted with who have been involved in PRSSA can say the same thing. It's really a great organization for anyone interested in the comms field.
Yeah, it is really just such a great organization, and it's been really fun meeting like so many people who've been involved with it, throughout their time, and it's so interesting to hear how people even heard about it. And so, I like how you said that you first attended for extra credit, and then just got involved from there, and eventually joined the executive board.
Yeah, like I said, you got to be right place, right time, raise your hand. I don't think I don't think you can have everything figured out. Like I certainly did not expect when I went to that first extra credit meeting that I was going to one day be helping to plan similar meetings. And so um, it really is just, I don't know. Looking back, I think again, right place, right time, having an open mind, and again, being nice to people and trying to build connections and relationships wherever applicable. And for me, that's really helped and has really been advantageous.
I love that. And how have you been able to to manage your time and everything between, peers to say your numerous, countless internships and, and your classes each term?
I like to say that my iCalendar is my Bible. I am a meticulous calendar user. I am a big list maker and to-do list maker, things like that. And so I think some of this is like a little bit inherent to being a bit type A, but I know that everyone has their own organization schedule and their own organization system, I should say. Um, and so some of my friends would not consider themselves type A, but they still are very organized in their own way. And I think whenever you have such a busy schedule and you're doing so many things, it can be really, really overwhelming if you don't know how to prioritize and manage all of those different things. And so that would mean, for me, sometimes it was really late nights and then really early mornings. And I don't think that that's for everyone, but for me, I was able to kind of compartmentalize and know what needed to be done and when it needed to be done. And that's not to say that I never dropped the ball, because I certainly did from time to time, but I think that's part of being human, and knowing when when things can kind of go by the wayside and when things need to be done stat. Um, so I guess to answer your question, notes, list, and calendars.
Yeah, I feel like that's always the best way to go. And I mean, it's one of the things too, where when you're so involved with everything, but that sort of has become your lifestyle. It's not so much as in that you become busy. It's just that your normal is busy.
Yeah, yeah. And so, like I said, now that I have a lot more free time than I've had in the past like 2 years, I'm almost like, oh my gosh, what do I do with this empty calendar? I don't know what to do. It's not my natural state because, like I said, even in high school, I was using my iCalendar to organize. Like, oh, this club meets on Wednesdays, and on Thursday I have this field trip, and we have this Scholastic Bowl match on Wednesday, and like all of these things. So yeah, I think it's something I learned really early on, that in order for me to like have any sense of a clear mind, I need to have everything kind of laid out before me. So that's what works for me. I think everyone has their own system that works for them, but definitely some form of organization is needed, I would say.
Yeah, and I mean, and even before we begin wrapping up, I mean, I've been enjoying this conversation. So yeah, and I think it's so fun being able to, like I said, to speak with others and get to hear a little bit about, their story. But I did want to, take some time and ask too. So, how was the transition for you overall? Like leaving high school in your hometown and going to college first, but then also transitioning from undergraduate to graduate education.
Yeah, I think no one no one really knows how these things are going to go. You have like the stereotypical, oh, Johnny's going off to college and he's gonna, join this club and blah blah blah. And like I think I was kind of expecting that in a sense towards the end of my senior year. Like, I have my college picked out. I'm going to move at this time. I'm going to room here, blah, blah, blah. And then the pandemic happened and things progressively got worse. And every week was like a new update on whether we'd be going to campus or not going to campus, or how our classes would be. And so I think that gives you like a little bit of and I think a lot of people our age can relate in knowing that nothing is a given. Like everything is kind of malleable and flexible, and things can change at any minute. And so my transition from high school to college was a bit rocky because things were just so up in the air in terms of where we'd be and how we'd study and what to expect. And so I think everyone my age and myself managed it well, and we got through it, and we're fine, and we're probably stronger because of it. Um, but it was certainly difficult. And I think because of that, my transition from bachelor's to master's was actually really easy in comparison because it was relatively similar. I studied at the same university, in the same college, in a similar degree program, and so I had a lot of the same professors. I was on the same, like I was in the same classrooms. I was still involved with PRSSA, so um, I still like had things that were giving me a sense of normalcy. And so, really, the only thing that changed was the course numbers were a little higher. And so I think that's a really privileged position as well, because I know a lot of people will transition into a master's program and it will be totally different and will take so much more time. And I think it's all dependent on your program and if you switch schools and what your just what your situation's like. So for me, bachelor's to master's was pretty easy, but the high school to college pipeline was a little rocky during the COVID pandemic.
Yeah, I certainly think that media has made it seem like, oh yeah, it's just that thing that that you just go do, and then it's that fun experience that you have will last a lifetime, and then when you actually go to do it, it's like, oh, this isn't what the TV show told me.
No, I don't think any sitcom can prepare you for actually moving from high school to college and from bachelor's to master's and from master's to job or to PhD if that's your path. Like it is, and everyone is so different. Everyone manages stress differently, everyone manages changes differently. And so you really have to kind of know yourself and know how you approach these things and how you digest these different changes to know how you're going to need to adapt and to kind of cope with those different changes. So,
Definitely. And yeah, and last but certainly not least, as we begin wrapping up, I did want to say, so what is next for you?
such a good question. Like I said, I finished my master's really early, so I have decided again, not my natural state to be in a little bit of a state of rest, but I am going to rest for the next couple months. I say now, maybe I will get a hankering or a good opportunity will come up, but my goal as of now is to take January and probably February to chill, to travel a little bit, see friends and family who I haven't really gotten to see over the past couple of years because I've been too busy. Um, I know that's a really privileged place to be and something that not everyone's able to do, but the way I see it, I'm going to be working my whole life. And I know that I really, when I work, like I put in 100%. And I would hate for me to lose an opportunity to kind of relish in the smaller things and have a good time when I might not get to in years down the road, just because things will get busier progressively in my career. So I'm taking this opportunity to do that. Again, I know it's really something that not everyone gets to do. So I'm really gracious for that. And I'm going to make the most of it. And then from there, we'll see. I have the resume floating around. We'll see what happens.
I love that. And if any of the viewers or listeners want to check out any of the amazing stuff that you're doing or potentially connect with you, where's the best places for them to do so?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is probably where I'm most active in terms of professional connected connection. So I'm just Konner Gross, Konner with a K. Um, I find that trips people up the most is the K at the front of my name. And then I also have, if you want to see some of the things I've done in the past, I have a website as well, konnergross.com. So you can kind of scroll through and see some of the crazy things I've done over the past few years. But I'm also like really open to chatting. I feel like every couple of weeks I get someone reaching out and just asking to kind of pick my brain about different things. And I'm always really open because whenever I'm searching for jobs, I love to do informational interviews and to just chat with people. So if that's ever something you're interested in, drop me a line and we'll work something out.
I love that. And certainly, last but not least, I did want to allow for you to go ahead and end out our discussion, whether it be an inspirational thought, a life lesson, or whatever the case may be. The floor is all yours, Connor.
Oh man. I think this was just really impactful for me to look back on my last few years of being in school, but then also like even flashing back to my days of being on dial-up internet and kind of thinking about in this conversation with you how all of those little things and those little moments through life have kind of manifested into where I am today. And I think it's good conversations like these that I'm really gracious for because otherwise sometimes you get lost in the hustle and bustle of things and you don't take a moment to look back at where you came from, to use a cliche, and how things have really been really good, and you've just been so blessed. So for me, I think that that's something this conversation has helped me to do, is look back and see how far I've come, but then also how gracious I am for the people and the things that have helped me get this far. So thank you for that.
Of course, and thank you so much for coming on and speaking with us.
Absolutely happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, and for those watching or listening, thank you so much as always for tuning in to the Tansson Talk Show. I always love doing this every week, and be sure to continue tuning in as we continue on our mission to bring people together. I'll see you next week. Take care.